don't have jurisdiction or
Good
power
morning,
to
Earth. This
facilitate
is Adam
the
Sturch,
return
broadcasting
of
from
the
the Mushroom
immigrants who
Mansion,
were sent to El
Taos, New
Salvador
Mexico,
from
working
the
on
U.S.
oil painting
without
yellow,
due
second
process.
in the primary triptych.
Immigrants jailed in Florida's new detention camp.
All right,
Say conditions of their confinement.
I may end up emphasizing some of the figurative qualities of this painting I was intending on de-emphasizing. I'm seeing an ear developing real plainly right here, sort of in this figure's chest, and then I think I'm going to run with some sort of hairish texture on this squiggle and down this way. And then I think I'm going to re-emphasize these highlights of the curtain kind of thing and go from there.
The jail can hold up to 5,000 immigrants. Last week, a group of Democratic Florida state lawmakers said they were denied entry to the jail for an inspection. On Capitol Hill, House Democrats are demanding the release of all files related to the dead convicted sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein that also mentioned Donald Trump. A letter from 16 lawmakers accuses Attorney General Pam Bondi of withholding Epstein files that implicate Trump. They write, quote, "Stop protecting your boss." This comes after the Justice Department released a memo this week reiterating that Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide and claiming he did not keep a client list. That is a U-turn from Attorney General Bondi's previous statements, including this claim during a Fox News interview in February.
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
Jeffrey Epstein counted Presidents Donald Trump and Bill Clinton among his friends. In 2002, Trump told New York Magazine, quote, "I've known Jeff for 15 years, terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It's even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side," unquote. On Tuesday, Trump angrily dismissed reporters' questions about Epstein during a cabinet meeting.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable.
Swiss medical authorities have approved the first drug suitable to treat malaria in babies and very young children. 8 African countries that participated in clinical trials are now poised to approve the malaria treatment, which is dissolvable and can be mixed with breast milk, making it easy to administer. Malaria kills about 600,000 people worldwide each year, a majority of them children under the age of 5. A coalition of doctors and public health groups has sued Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. over changes to vaccine policy which they say undermine public trust in vaccines. The complaint filed in a U.S. District Court in Massachusetts accuses RFK Jr. of violating federal law by unilaterally altering COVID-19 vaccine recommendations without scientific evidence for children and people who are pregnant. The American Academy of Pediatrics called the move an assault on science, public health, and evidence-based medicine. The Academy's president, Dr. Susan Cressley, spoke in a video accompanying the lawsuit.
Because this wasn't just sidelining science, it's an attack on the very foundation of how we protect families and children's health, and the consequences could be dangerous. The American Academy of Pediatrics isn't standing by. We're stepping up. We're taking legal action because we believe children deserve better. We've published our own immunization schedule for decades, and will continue to do so, because kids can't wait for politicians to sort this out.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Trump met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House for a second straight day Tuesday, as Trump's Middle East envoy claimed Israel and Hamas are nearing a breakthrough on a ceasefire agreement. It's not clear what Trump and Netanyahu discussed behind closed doors, but Israeli media are reporting Netanyahu's under extreme pressure to reach a 60-day ceasefire deal that would see 10 living Israeli hostages released, along with the bodies of dead hostages, in exchange for the release of Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli jails. There are more Palestinian prisoners in jails than any time in a quarter of a century. Hamas negotiators are also seeking the withdrawal of Israeli forces, international guarantees for an end to the war, the resumption of humanitarian aid shipments overseen by the United Nations and the International Committee of the Red Cross, and an end to the operations of the U.S. Israeli-backed militarized shadowy aid group, the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, known as GHF. Earlier today, hundreds of starving Palestinians in Gaza were forced to move toward the southern city of Rafah to search for food after GHF closed its only remaining aid distribution center in the central Gaza Strip. Palestinian officials say more than 770 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces and U.S. security contractors at sites run by GHF since it began operations in May. Back in Washington, D.C., Prime Minister Netanyahu is set to meet today with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon, and again at an event tonight featuring the heads of Jewish organizations, evangelical leaders, and senior administration officials. For more, we're joined in Washington, D.C. by Matt Duss. He's the Executive Vice President at the Center for International Policy and former Foreign Policy Advisor to Senator Bernie Sanders. Matt, welcome back to Democracy Now! Can you talk about the carnage right now in Gaza, whether we're talking about starvation or Israeli bombing of civilians? Over the last few days, hundreds more have been killed. This as President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu meet in Washington, D.C., and there's discussion of a possible ceasefire. What do you know?
Yeah, I mean, as you said and you described, and we've all seen with our own eyes day after day, the destruction, the death, the suffering is unspeakable, and we can't allow it to simply fade into the background. This needs to end. It's unclear. You know, you said that there's pressure being put on Netanyahu by Trump. That may be true in terms of achieving a 60-day ceasefire, but what's important here is that pressure is sustained to turn this into a durable and permanent ceasefire. That's what was lacking in the ceasefire that was agreed earlier this year in January before Trump's inauguration. He put pressure on Netanyahu to agree to that temporary ceasefire, but then Netanyahu, of course, broke that ceasefire agreement and returned to the war because his interests and the interests of his government remain to make this a perpetual, ongoing war, and that's what he's interested in.
So talk about the significance of this, third meeting of President Trump and Netanyahu since Trump became president once again. Talk about the meetings that have been held from Hegseth to Vance, and what is being accomplished here, and what you understand is happening between the negotiators in Doha, the Hamas and Israeli negotiators.
Sure. Well, I mean, of course, there's always, engagement in meetings at multiple levels between multiple officials in the U.S. and Israeli government and in the region. I think one of the big focus of this meeting between Trump and Netanyahu, or this round of meetings, is to kind of try and take a victory lap, as they see it, after the war on Iran, which has paused for the moment. Israel launched its war a few weeks ago in the midst of negotiations between the U.S. and Iran over its nuclear program. Trump eventually launched U.S. airstrikes on Iran's nuclear program. The actual impact of those strikes are still unclear, but clearly Netanyahu and Trump have an interest in promoting that as a massive success. The question is, as I said earlier, does this now translate into attention and focus and pressure from Trump on Netanyahu to get a ceasefire in Gaza? We've heard reports of the meetings in Doha, Qatar, between the U.S. and Israeli and Hamas officials and other negotiators, that they are getting closer, but the key sticking point remains Hamas's central demand that this agreement lead to a permanent ceasefire, and that is what Netanyahu has always resisted. There has been a deal on the table with this condition from very, very early in this war, from November of 2023. Netanyahu has consistently refused, and unfortunately, just from the public comments from Trump, it seems that Trump, like the Biden administration before him, is willing to give political cover to Netanyahu to pretend that he's actually interested in a real ceasefire when clearly he is not. This is a tool of pressure that the United States can and should use if it really wants to get a ceasefire, is to make clear publicly that Netanyahu is the problem here. He is the one refusing. There's enormous political pressure in Israel from hostages' families and friends, but not only from them, from the Israeli public more broadly, who are tired of this war and they want it to end. They want to get the hostages back. But that's something that Trump, unfortunately, still seems unwilling to say.
I want to go back to their first meeting on Monday. At that long table where Netanyahu presented Trump with a letter nominating him for the Nobel Peace Prize. Netanyahu also said he was working with the U.S. to find countries or a country that would take the Palestinians, claiming that they would be free to leave Gaza voluntarily. This is what he said.
I think President Trump had a brilliant vision. It's called free choice. You know, if people want to stay, they can stay. But if they want to leave, they should be able to leave. It shouldn't be a prison.
He repeatedly talked about Palestinians' freedom to choose. Can you talk about in the context of what is taking place in Gaza right now? The starvation, the bombings, the killings, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost indescribable how dishonest and disgusting that is from Netanyahu. First, let's step back. Let's understand that this is an accused war criminal who's under indictment from the International Criminal Court, which has issued a warrant for his arrest. So the fact that the President of the United States has welcomed him to the White House is a disgrace to the United States. Every American should feel ashamed and embarrassed about this. And for Netanyahu to nominate him for a Nobel Peace Prize is, it's just another example of, foreign leaders understanding that you need to flatter the President of the United States, this President of the United States, in order to get on his good side. But it's ultimately meaningless. I could nominate my ice cream man for a Nobel Peace Prize just as easily. But for Netanyahu to refer to Palestinians' free choice to leave, when you're facing constant violence, as Palestinians are, it is not a free choice to leave. If Palestinians had their choice, they would stay in Gaza. Gaza is their home. So to treat this as anything like voluntary is completely dishonest, and it's really outrageous to see it being reported this way, as the Palestinians are being given the option to continue to live among the rubble and the bombing and the starvation and the disease, or to transfer themselves. This is not in any sense voluntary. This is ethnic cleansing. Multiple human rights organizations and scholars globally have referred to this as a genocide, and I think that is how we need to understand it.
Now, the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for top Taliban leaders for gender violence against women and girls. But earlier, in the last months, they issued arrest warrants for the former Defense Secretary of Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu. The U.S. receiving him, not enforcing ICC warrant seeking his arrest for war crimes and crimes against humanity committed in Gaza. Of course, the U.S. is not a signatory to the International Criminal Court. But you have the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory, Francesca Albanese, hitting out at countries that allowed Netanyahu to fly over their airspace en route to the United States, suggesting they may have flouted their obligations under international law. She said on Wednesday the governments of Italy, France, and Greece needed to explain why they provided safe passage to Netanyahu. Matt Duss, your response.
Yeah, I think Special Representative Albanese is right. And that is why there's a massive effort to defame her and to silence her. But I think her point is correct. Countries in Europe that have signed on to the International Criminal Court have a responsibility here, and they have failed in that responsibility. I would also add that by welcoming Netanyahu, by attacking the International Criminal Court, the Trump administration, as well as other European countries that are failing to honor that warrant, are undermining the work of the court more broadly. You mentioned the warrants against the Taliban leaders. I think think those are appropriate. But those Taliban leaders who have now faced indictment for their abuse of women, they are the beneficiaries of this. They are the winners of Netanyahu being welcomed to the White House, just as Vladimir Putin is. Vladimir Putin faces a warrant from the ICC. He's a big winner here because you are undermining the work of the court. You're telling the world that we can just choose to ignore these warrants and these indictments when we choose. That really undermines the work to uphold a set of rules and norms regarding the protection of civilians here.
And I want to go to Putin in a minute and Trump's turnaround on the Russian invasion. But I want to ask you one last question. I want to go to a clip of Mike Huckabee, the U.S. ambassador to Israel. This is a recording obtained by CNN from 2016 when Huckabee was running for president. Listen carefully.
Basically, there really is no such thing as, and I have to be careful saying this, as people really get upset, there's really no such thing as a Palestinian. It's not.
There's no such thing as a Palestinian, Ambassador Huckabee said. Again, I want to quote that. He said, basically, there really is no such thing as, and I need to be careful saying this because people get really upset, there's really no such thing as Palestinians, and has supported the annexation, Israel's annexation of the West Bank. So this goes to the meeting that apparently, or event that Netanyahu will be attending on his last night here tonight in Washington, D.C., with Jewish leaders and evangelical leaders. You know, there's Kufi, for example, the Christians United for Israel. I wanted to go to that meeting that they're going to be having, and the role of evangelicals, like Mike Huckabee, a leader of Zionist evangelicals, in supporting Israel. Matt, you personally know a lot about this.
Right. I mean, I am quite familiar with Huckabee's views on this and with the Christian evangelical Zionist view on this. This is part of the community that I grew up in. And I think this meeting tonight is very interesting for Netanyahu because this is his real base in the United States, is right-wing Christian evangelical Zionists. American Jews overwhelmingly vote for Democrats. They are overwhelmingly liberal, and a huge part of them support Palestinian liberation, a two-state solution, and do not support his government. Unfortunately, conservative Christian evangelicals, as you heard from Mike Huckabee, many of them simply don't recognize the Palestinians as a people with legitimate claims. They believe that Israel should control all of the land of Israel, even beyond Israel's current borders, partly as a prerequisite for the second coming of Jesus Christ. That's part of the theology here. And these, I would also add, this in terms of numbers, this is the biggest part of the right-wing pro-Israel lobby in the United States. There are far more evangelical Christians than there are American Jews. These organizations do a lot of the real on-the-ground lobbying in various states and various districts. And this is, as I said, this is Netanyahu's real political base here in the United States, and he is smart enough to understand that. But we should also understand that the policy they are supporting is deeply inhumane, it is destructive, and it is dangerous for everyone in the United States and in the region.
Matt Duss, before we go, I want to ask you about developments with Ukraine. Ukraine's Air Force says Russia launched its largest aerial attack overnight since its invasion in 2022, firing a record 741 drones and missiles, most of them targeting the city of Lutsk in western Ukraine. The barrage prompted Poland to activate its air defenses and scramble fighter jets. Russia's attack came after President Trump Tuesday sharply criticized Russian President Vladimir Putin, his latest in a series of U-turns on Ukraine policy.
And sort of made her hair set of rhythms and sort of into an eye impression. I think I'm going to use some bright primary Soho yellow and hit the curtain highlight edges again, so I'm going to turn this into a second clip. Take 2 coming up.
to Ukraine.
Take two.
Apparently, he said he wanted to check if there were enough weapons for the U.S. to have, as well as sending to Ukraine. All of this comes as the First International Court has found Moscow responsible for human rights abuses in Ukraine. Judges at the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg delivered 2 rulings against Russia today. In the first ruling, it found Russia violated international law during the conflict in Ukraine. It also ruled Russia was being behind the downing of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 in 2014, which killed 298 people. Matt Duss, your former foreign policy advisor to Senator Bernie Sanders, you're vice president of the Center for International Policy. Explain what's going on here right now and the significance of Trump's turnaround when it comes to Putin.
Right. I mean, I think we all heard that Trump was apparently unaware of the cutoff in arms from the U.S. to Ukraine that was announced last week. I mean, I think no one is surprised to learn once again that there is a pretty chaotic and disorganized policy process in this administration, if one can even call it a policy process. But I think what's important here is that Trump, having promised to make peace between Ukraine and Russia, saying that, you know, I'll make a peace deal in the first few days, it'll be really easy. He's learning that it's actually not that easy. And it's not that easy because Vladimir Putin is not interested in a peace deal. I think that is the most important takeaway here. Many of us support negotiations. I think no one wants peace more than the Ukrainians themselves. But we do need to understand that Putin has a vote. And Putin's interests, as far as I've seen, have not changed. He's going to continue to make war on Ukraine. He wants to remove Ukraine's independence. He wants to make Ukraine essentially a part of Russia's imperium as he sees it. He has not changed those goals. And until he does, it's hard to see what we can actually negotiate in terms of a ceasefire, let alone a durable peace deal.
And why Trump's turnaround?
I think Trump is, again, he feels embarrassed, I would guess, as someone who came in making bold claims about his ability to make a deal, saying, oh, I know Putin, I know how he thinks. And here Putin has shown, no, actually you don't understand how I think, or at least you have not recognized what I really want. And that has really, you know, annoyed Donald Trump clearly. The question is what Donald Trump now does about it. Will he sustain this defensive aid to Ukraine? Will he work more closely with other allies in Europe to up the pressure? Will he work with others in the global community to put pressure on Putin to get to a real negotiation? But given the way he's operated thus far, alienating allies, alienating others in the global south who might serve a brokering role here, it's hard for me to see how he could actually stand up a real and credible peace process.
In fact, going after, for example, the big BRICS summit in Brazil. BRICS, of course, stands for Russia, Brazil, India, China, and South Africa.
Yeah.
Matt Duss, I want to thank you. Go ahead, 20 seconds.
No, I would just say, I mean, working through some of the BRICS countries, particularly Brazil, was an option here, and it's one he should look at. But I don't, given what he's said and done thus far, I don't know if that's an option right now.
Matt Duss, Executive Vice President, Center for International Policy, former foreign policy advisor to Senator Bernie Sanders. A major lawsuit is going to trial, just begun, challenging the Trump administration's attack on free speech by arresting and detaining international students and professors who speak out on Palestinian rights. When we come back, we'll go to Boston, where the trial's taking place.
Part I like that I'm trying to decide whether or not I want to put in a a layer of white highlights on top of the yellow curtain pattern.
The Healers by the late great Randy Weston. He
to
performed the song
emphasize the ripple.
when he spoke to Democracy Now! In 2012. Go to democracynow.org to see the whole interview. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. We look now at the first case to go to trial that challenges the Trump administration's policy of arresting, detaining, and deporting international students and professors who participate in pro-Palestinian activism. The trial began this week after the case was filed in March by the American Association of University Professors, the AAUP, including its chapters at Harvard, New York University, and Rutgers, and the Middle East Studies Association, MESA. The Trump administration tried to get the case dismissed, but those efforts were rejected by U.S. District Judge William Young, an 84-year-old Ronald Reagan appointee, who ordered a trial saying it was the, quote, best way to get at the truth. In a minute, we'll get an update on the first 2 days of the trial, where the first of some 20 witnesses testified. But first, we go to Zachary Samelin, Associate Professor of English at NYU, Vice President of the NYU AAUP chapter, speaking at a rally Monday outside the Boston courthouse.
We joined the lawsuit because we refuse to let Trump, Rubio, or anybody else use citizenship to divide and conquer us. And above all, we joined to fight back against the criminalization of all protests, but especially protests against the destruction and ethnic cleansing of Palestine.
Another speaker at Monday's rally was Caroline Light, a senior lecturer in gender and sexuality studies at Harvard University, a member of Harvard's AAUP, another one of the plaintiffs in the case.
This lawsuit is deeply personal to me and to my mom. We are descended from people who fled pogroms in the Jewish Pale of Settlement to come to the United States seeking refuge, and especially so that they could practice their freedom of religion that the old country denied us, right? A key tenet of Judaism that I was raised with is something called tikkun olam. It literally means repairing the world. It is the responsibility of every Jewish person to do their best to try to denounce oppression wherever we see it, to speak out against unfairness and harm and violence against others. Last Hanukkah, my eldest child gifted me this keffiyeh that I'm wearing today. It's a little warm, honestly, but I wear it in solidarity with my brave friends and colleagues and students who have spoken out against the relentless violence in Gaza. It feels like such a small thing to do. And yet, in the context of this chilling of freedom of expression and criminalization of pro-Palestinian solidarity, this mere act of wearing a keffiyeh is often characterized as subversion and as anti-Semitism, just wearing it. So this administration claims that ideological deportations are necessary, are part of their effort to fight anti-Semitism and to keep Jewish people from harm. Well, I'll tell you what harms Jewish people, and I can speak as a historian on this topic. It's the relentless assault on freedom of expression, it's the language of us versus them, and it's the criminalization of our valued community members, our colleagues, and our students. Make no mistake, we all suffer when some of us are silenced. In a university setting especially, it makes honest inquiry absolutely impossible. We can't do our jobs as educators, as researchers, when these circumstances prevail. And so today, we are fighting back. And as I said, this is personal for me and for my mom. And to the spurious claim that ideological deportation protects Jewish people, I'll say it today, and I'll say it until I have no voice left. Not in my name.
That's Caroline Light, senior lecturer in gender and sexuality studies at Harvard University, a member of Harvard AAUP, one of the plaintiffs in this case, the American Association of University Professors versus Rubio. For more, we're joined in Boston before day 3 of the trial by Jamil Jaffer, director of the Knight First Amendment Institute at Columbia University, part of the team of lawyers representing professors in their lawsuit against the Trump administration's repression of students and faculty involved in pro-Palestine activism. He was previously the ACLU's deputy legal director. Jamil Jaffer, welcome back to Democracy Now! Explain why this case went to trial. We see so many injunctions issued by judges across the country, but this one is being heard by a federal judge, not before a jury, but before the judge.
Right. Yeah. Well, we moved for preliminary relief in the case, so we filed a motion very soon after we filed the complaint, asking the court to grant immediate relief, and the court said that it wouldn't grant immediate relief, but it would give us a trial on an expedited schedule. We are before a judge who has a practice of collapsing requests for preliminary relief with trials on the merits, so this is not entirely unprecedented or surprising. And it does give us an opportunity to create a complete factual record, and we are very grateful for that. And as you noted, the trial started yesterday or Monday. Today is day 3. We expect it to go through the end of next week.
So why did the AAUP sue Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, the case known as AAUP versus Rubio?
Yeah, so I know you've talked about the student cases many times. There are a dozen students at least who have been arrested, detained, and threatened with deportation on the basis of their pro-Palestinian advocacy. There are hundreds of others whose visas have been revoked under the same policy. Some of those students have filed suit. Some of them were held in detention, and judges have now released them from detention. Those cases are ongoing because the Trump administration continues to assert the authority to deport people on the basis of their pro-Palestinian expression and association. But our view, and more importantly, the American Association of University Professors' view and the Middle East Studies Association's view, was that these arrests and detentions and threatened deportations are causing harm not only to, most obviously, the students who are being detained and threatened with deportation, but to the larger academic community as well. Because students and faculty all over the country are quite literally terrified about the possibility that their advocacy and expression will lead to detention. They are terrified that ICE agents will show up at their door any day and take them away because they wrote an op-ed critical of Israel or because they attended a public protest. And the result is that there is this climate of fear and repression on college campuses across the country. And this case is an effort to get at that larger climate of fear and repression caused by this ideological deportation policy. I think it's complementary to the cases that have been filed by the students themselves.
Can you talk about some of the witnesses, like the Brown anthropologist Naja Alali and Megan Hiska, who is a Northwestern University philosophy professor, how they've changed what they do? They're no longer writing the pieces they're supposed to be publishing because of the climate in this country today and the direct physical threats.
Yeah, I mean, this is a more general pattern, but we have had 3 witnesses testify over the last 2 days. You mentioned 2 of them, Nadia Al-Ali at Brown University, Megan Hiska at Northwestern University, and yesterday we had Bernard Nickel, who was until very recently the chair of the philosophy department at Harvard University. The 3 of them testified to the chill that has taken hold at university campuses across the country. And they describe their own decisions to forego certain kinds of expression or scholarship or public presentation because of the fear of arrests and detention and deportation. All 3 of them are foreign citizens. that has been the bulk of the testimony presented to the court over the last 2 days. Today, for the first time, we will hear from a government official. We're going to hear from Peter Hatch, who is a senior official in the Department of Homeland Security, who was intimately involved in the decisions to identify students to be targeted under this policy.
Can you talk about the lawsuit being filed jointly with the Middle East Studies Association, programs of regional areas that are coming under attack by the Trump administration? In late March, Columbia announcing it'll place its Middle Eastern, South Asian, and African Studies Department under review to secure some $400 million in federal funding that had been frozen. It's your university, Jamil, where you run the Knight Institute.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the chill that we've described in the case, I think, is felt across the country, across universities, across departments. Now, that said, I think it falls most heavily on professors and students at universities that have already been targeted in other ways by the Trump administration. Columbia is one of those. Harvard is another. You know, and even if you look at the students who have been arrested and detained under this policy, you know, a number of them come from Columbia University. Mohsen Madawi, Yansio Chang, Mahmoud Khalil. These are all Columbia students, and I think that it's fair to say that students at those universities are especially terrified about the possibility that ICE will target them. So the goal of this lawsuit is to get broad relief, not limited to any particular student, but rather relief with respect to the policy itself. And the policy, as we describe it, is the arrest and detention and deportation of students based on their pro-Palestinian advocacy and expression. And we point to the statements that senior government officials, including President Trump and Secretary Rubio, have made in press conferences on social media in threatening
I get some nice highlights and shadows and rhythms developing within and without the central figure blob. So yeah, we'll see how much further this one has to go. I'm really not sure. It's starting to outpace Blue, honestly. I may go more in depth with the detail. I'm just letting it evolve as it will. So that's it for the moment. Thank you for watching. That's Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting yellow. Have a good day.
Intimately involved in the decision to target particular students.
And we'll continue.